At last, Emory turned to leave, well pleased, and then a thought flashed through Emma's mind, a realization that chilled her even more deeply than the rain. This is how he likes me best, when I'm in need of rescue. Hello, bitches, and welcome to my new segment called Bookworm Bitches. This is a segment where I review some of the books that I'm reading, and today's book is Damsel. So Damsel is by Elana K. Arnold, and this book I read quite a while ago. Sometimes I go to the bookstore and I just browse around, and sometimes I find a book that I just buy on a whim because I'm like, ooh, this sounds really interesting, let me just buy it, rather than reading it on the library. So this happened to be one of those books. I picked it up because I thought the cover looked super interesting, and I was like, ooh, what is this? Then I read the cover, and then I read it because it's not a very long book for me. I'm a pretty fast reader. This book's only like 300 pages. So before I get into it, let me read the inside cover, which caught my attention. So the inside sleeve says, "The long Rite has existed for as long as anyone can remember. When the king dies, his son, the prince, must venture out to the Grey Lands, slay a fierce dragon, and rescue the damsel to be his bride. This is the way things have been done. When Alma awakes in the arms of Prince Emory, she knows none of this. She has no memory of what came before she was captured by the dragon, or the horrors she faced in its lair. She only knows this handsome young man, the story he tells her of her rescue, and her destiny of sitting on the throne beside him. It's all like a dream, like something from a fairy tale." As Emma follows Emory to the kingdom of Harding, however, she discovers that not all is as it seems. There is more than legends of dragons and damsels that everyone knows. The greatest threats may not be behind her, but around her now, and closing in. So that's the description inside. This comes off as almost like a retelling of fairy tales, where it's like, you know, the prince saves a damsel in a tower or whatever from a dragon. So you're like, oh, okay, it's gonna be a retelling. And sometimes I don't like looking at reviews sometimes before I read a book, because I don't want my perception to be skewed or to take on other people's judgments before I read a book, because, you know, you always want your own opinion to be formed by the book. So I didn't really do any of that. I did after, but we'll get into that. Yeah, so this book is exactly as it says. It is basically a retelling, or a microscopic view and the interesting turns in a classic fairy tale. This book was found in the young adult section of chapters when I went in to buy it, and I don't think that assessment fits, and I'll tell you why. The main issue I have with this book, and there will be no spoilers at all, so feel free to continue with me. Like I said, there'll be no spoilers, so you can listen, but I feel like it's important to know that this book is filled with triggers. So there's no trigger warning whatsoever. I particularly don't have any triggers, but I have a lot of friends who do need trigger warnings for certain things, and this book does not. So unless you go online and you research this book, or somebody's told you about it or something like that, you're not going to know any of this. So let me be very clear. This book should have trigger warnings on it. This book is filled with sexual abuse, assaults, threats of rape, actual rape, physical and emotional abuse all together. It's filled with animal cruelty, humiliation, bestiality, gaslighting, and just all around misogynistic and sexist stuff to the extreme. So, we're always going to find misogyny in a lot of different things, but this goes to an extreme. So there's also like self-harm and suicide talk in it. So all of this should be warned. And so the thing is that this is a very dark book. It has a lot of adult content, and I feel like it should have been warned. I feel like it definitely should be something that should be brought up to people's attention, and then they can make the assessment for themselves if they want to continue. But because I didn't do the research on this book beforehand, and I didn't know anything about this book before reading it, it came as a surprise to me, and it came out of nowhere. I have to say, I have real problems with this book. I love reading, and I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to certain books, but I had a really hard time with this book. It took me a while to read it just because the more I read it, the angrier I got. So I understand where the author was coming from, I think. It's all about putting like a very huge microscope on those kind of like early fairy tale things where, you're expected to be the queen because you were rescued and you need to shut up and do what your husband tells you. I can understand her wanting to put a microscope on the sexist ways and that sort of thing. But I don't feel like it was done in the best of ways. I can totally understand where she was coming from, but it made me uncomfortable, it made me angry, and there are a lot of things that so it took a lot of effort to finish it. I don't like not finishing books, no matter how angry or, whatever the book makes me feel. Once I get to a certain point, I feel like I have to finish it because that's just who I am. So I did end up finishing it, and I have to say that I wasn't as impressed as I wanted to be, especially most of the action happens in the last couple of pages. And so, so I'm not a huge fan of this book. I went back and I read reviews on Goodreads and that sort of thing about this book, and a lot of people are rating this book 5s. It's one or the other. You either are not impressed and you're gonna put it at the bottom of the stars, or you put it at the top of the stars, because some people like feeling that uncomfortableness. They like the idea that it portrays, and they like thinking and feeling something. I did not. I don't know what else to say other than, I was not too happy with this book. I really feel like she should have given trigger warnings. I've tried going back to see if there was like a trigger warning that I missed. I don't see one. So like I said, I understand where she was coming from. I don't feel it was done well. So I'm just going to go straight into the rankings. I'm gonna be ranking these books on 6 criteria that I think would be interesting. That's sometimes what I wish I could see in some of the book reviews that I watch. I think they're having a tap dancing party upstairs, and I'm trying to film on a few different criteria that sometimes I wish I would get from other people. Some people do it on Goodreads, which I appreciate. So some of the criteria that I'm going to be using is pacing, storyline, characters, relatability, rereadability, and just overall love. So overall, the pacing in this book is consistent. There are some lulls, but for the most part, it keeps up the same pace. Apart from the very end, the last couple of pages, we finally see everything come together. So out of that, I would say out of 5, I would give the pacing about a 3.5 for this book. As far as storyline goes, it's really hard to look past some of the things like animal cruelty and that sort of thing. It was very weird too. So like I felt like it was very graphic for certain parts where it didn't need to be at all, and then other parts where it could have gone more graphic to help paint a better picture, or it could have dived deeper into certain descriptions. It didn't. So it was polar opposite onto, I guess, what I'm used to. Like it, yeah, like I said. So the storyline is hard to kind of figure out because I feel like I understand where she was going, and it could have been really interesting to kind of break down the walls of what's expected between men and women in these kind of fairy tale things and taking back your power and all that kind of stuff. So in a way it was a very interesting storyline, and I wish, I guess, it was done a little bit better or a little bit different. Some people liked it. For storyline, it was actually really predictable. It was a good idea you got very early on the situation and what was happening. So because of the predictability and just waiting for it to get there, for her to hurry up and catch up with everything, I would have to say I'm gonna have to give the storyline a 2. Maybe even closer to like a 1.5. It was well written overall, like the author knows how to write, but I don't think the storyline presented well, because like I said, it was predictable and you're just waiting for her to hurry up, and then everything happens all at once at the last couple of pages of the book. So I'm gonna have to give it that. Characters. Okay, so the characters in this book, you don't have a whole lot. The main characters are Prince Emory, and you also have Emma. That's how I pronounced it. Whether it's right or not, I don't care. But, so they're the main characters in this. You spend the most time with them. There's also the prince's mom in here and the trainer. But based on those two characters that you follow the most, again, this book is really hard because they're polar opposites. You know, you have this prince who's chauvinistic and, you know, degrading and demeaning and all of this stuff to the other character. Then there's a part that took it upon himself to twist it even farther. So I obviously have no sympathy for him, but I'm trying to see his side of the story. So I find him super flawed, and I am not a fan. So, I mean, but that was the intent, right? The intent was not to care as much for this character, and you care a whole lot for Emma because, you know, she comes off as meek and she's just trying to understand who she is, where she came from, and she's put in this rock and a hard place. But again, that was the intent. As far as characters go, I felt like I could understand the responses that Emma made a few times, and how she responded so she could survive and she could figure things out for herself. But I feel like I wish we had gotten more out of her, and we had gotten more levels, rather than it just being kind of straightforwards. I wish we had gotten more depth out of all of the characters. They seemed very, like, straight, deadpan. There wasn't a whole lot to them. Yes, they were very flawed characters, which I really like. I like having flawed characters, but they also have to have that other quality where you want to root for them, you want to, you know, you want to find some level of understanding. Like, even villains, I feel like you have to have something to hold on to, and I just didn't get that from any of them. I felt like we could have had more layers more levels, more roller coaster of something, you know? So, I mean, it's really rough because it's not, I mean, the characters themselves are probably like a 2. Which goes into my next review, which is relatability. And I don't have relatability. Like, yes, I've had moments where my life has been criticized just because I was a woman. There are things like sexist moments. I've, you know, had a lot of different kind of abuse, whether it be emotional or whatever, and so there are certain things that I can relate to and I can understand I can kind of understand how one would react to certain situations. And it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And I know I'm not even close to being the only one. And so in some ways, there are moments where you can absolutely be like, yes, I relate to this certain moment. But at the same time, a lot of these go to the extreme, as it's meant to. It's supposed to really make you think and really blow things up. But I think it went to the extreme where it slowly became unrelatable. And so out of 5, I'd have to give it a 2. Some things I'm like, yes, this is why. But this is a really hard book. Rereadability, I mean, I'm not gonna do it out of 5. For readability, it's more just like, is it or isn't it? And for me, Damsel is not rereadable. Unless I wanted to get angry all over again. And it has been quite a while since I read this, and I wasn't going to review this, but I think it's important because, again, it's something that should be broadcasted, that this should have trigger warnings. I believe it is in the wrong genre. It should not be a young adult, and if it is in the young adult section, if you truly believe that it should be there, then it should have some sort of trigger warning on it. I really do. So for me, this book was unrereadable. So that brings us to our last critique, which is the overall rating for this book. So Damsel by Elana K. Arnold. On Goodreads, I did give it a 2, I believe, but I think I might have to change my answer just because they don't let you do halves on Goodreads. That's one thing I don't like. So I wanted to give it a half just because it was well written, but overall I did not like the book. I wanted to give it maybe a 1.5 just to be generous because, like I said, it was well written, but the storyline was predictable, the characters were unrelatable to a certain point to the extreme, and the overall content was harsh and hard to read at times. So overall, I'm gonna have to give this book probably a 1.5. Whether I liked it or not, it was well written. It's just, it was not my taste. I didn't like it. I don't like that it didn't have trigger warnings beforehand. I can't recommend this to a few of my friends just from the content alone, and I warned them, hey, don't read this book. This is what it's got in there. Unless you want to read that, then again, sorry. It is really hard to rate this book just out of pure anger and frustration alone. Like I said, I got angry every time I had to read this book. I wish I hadn't have started it sometimes, but I just want to give you a sense of the darkness of this story. And like, I like dark. I like a dark story sometimes. Like you'll see some of the other books that I come out with reviews. Sometimes I like the dark twisted, you know, but I also feel like there is a fine line between telling a story with that purpose and literally just throwing it out there and making somebody uncomfortable. And yeah. So this is not a spoiler at all, but they refer to his member as a yard. So they reference his yard a lot. And I gotta say, I've read like a few like romance novels or smut books or whatever you want to call them. I've read a few, and I have to say, like, they all have nicknames for other things, and I have to say, I've never heard the word yard so much in a book. Like, it's all the time. At least from my opinion, to the point where I'm just like, oh my god, I don't want to hear about it anymore. That word will never be the same, whether it's in good context or not. Like, somebody once said that they were having a yard sale, and I literally choked. It was right after I had read this book, and it was just all yards all the time, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a yard sale, and I'm like, no, can't do it. But that's just my opinion, and I want to keep it open to you. Have you guys read Damsel? How do you feel? Is it a book that you like to read? If you do, please tell me in the comments what made you enjoy it so much. On Goodreads, it is kind of one or the other. You either love it or you hate it. So I'm kind of interested to really dive in. So if, like I said, if you've read it, please let me know how you feel. This is a conversation, but that's just my opinion, and I want to know yours. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe and hit the notification, and you'll get updates on when I put new videos out. I put out videos every Wednesday, so make sure you're around for that, and I'll do some more book reviews, and we'll chat books. Thanks for watching. This has been Bookworm Bitches, and I appreciate you. And we will see you in the next one.